to Doughnut Economics. Then Jenny is going to take us through what Doughnut Economics tells us about Leeds as a city, because we've done quite a bit of work on that. We're one of the few cities in the UK that's produced a data portrait of where we are in terms of Doughnut. Then, because it's the West Yorkshire Innovation Festival, we're going to be looking at what Doughnut Economics means for innovating within a business, and then we'll close with some questions, and hopefully we might get all of that done by about 12. If it leaks ever so slightly over, it's not going to go that far over, because obviously we all want our lunch, don't we? Well, I certainly do. Right, let's make a bit of a start. I think we've got most people here. So I'm going to share my screen, and we'll take it from there. So you should be able to see that now. Oddly, I can't see any of you. So comment in the chat if you can't see my screen. So yeah, my name's Tim Frenno. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a consultant on purpose-driven change and innovation. I used to be the head of business and the head of policy at the York and North Yorkshire Local Enterprise Partnership. But now I run my own business. I run an online book club that helps people reconnect with themselves and with nature. And I also run a book club for the publishing arm of the Do Lectures, the Do Book Club, and this is all about helping people achieve their potential as makers, creatives, and entrepreneurs. So I've kind of got a foot in both camps. I used to work in economic development. Now I'm an entrepreneur, but I've always been involved in creating change and innovation and trying to adopt a more sustainable way of doing things. Which is why when the Doughnut launched here in Leeds, I was overjoyed to see what Jenny and the team had done, and I put my hand straight up. I was like, "Hey guys, I'd love to be involved." So that's why I'm here talking about what we're doing in business terms. So I think we need to take a moment just to reflect about where we are, because this is really a crucial moment for humanity. It's a unique inflection point. In years to come, we'll look back at this at the start of the 21st century and say, that was the time that things started to change. And hopefully that change is going to take us into a future where we can all thrive, but there is a potential for absolutely catastrophic change. So we have a choice. We have to rise to the challenge of making sure that everyone can live within the planet's means, and that's what Doughnut Economics is here to help us with. So let's look a bit more about where we are. To start off with, I'd like you just to take a minute just to think about why you're in business or why you're employed. Jo, who's part of our coalition, she calls this the toddler test. You might have come across it as the 5 whys, but just ask yourself, why am I in business? Or why am I in this job? And then turn that answer into a question. So pitch it back to yourself. If you say, "Oh, it's to pay my mortgage," well, why do you need to pay a mortgage? And then keep asking those questions. But just take 2 minutes. Just work it through yourself. I'm gonna try and play a little bit of music while you do that. I'm gonna give you 2 minutes. Have a think about it. If it ends up being too much like a mission statement for your business, go a bit deeper. Think again about why, and let us know in the chat.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds, getting so much resistance from behind. Time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street, singing songs and a carrying signs. Mostly say hooray for our side. It's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Okay, how was that? Do let us know where you got to in the chat, what your reason for being in business is. But my guess is that you probably arrived at something like putting food on the table for you or for your employees or meeting your customers' needs. So in other words, we're in business to provide benefit for the people that are part of our business. But as we'll see, collectively, our economy isn't providing the benefits that we thought it would do. In fact, it's doing the opposite. And it's creating lots of disbenefits. And I'm sure there'll be people going, well, that's not me. That's not my business. We're trying to be positive. We're not the ones doing the harm. But I think it's important that we recognise that actually we're all part of a system, and the system collectively is causing harm to humanity. And to think otherwise, it's that old thing about it's like you're sitting in a traffic jam complaining about the traffic, without realising that you're the traffic. So let's have a look where we are. So really, the cracks in the system are starting to become clear. You can look at there's sort of three groupings of cracks in the system. There's one, the big obvious one that is increasingly at the top of the agenda, is about climate change and climate breakdown. And we all know what's going on there. But actually, there's more going wrong in the environment than just climate breakdown. You know, we're on the verge of the sixth mass extinction. We're into the Anthropocene period. There's more human-made stuff on the planet than there is naturally grown stuff on the planet. So there's lots of things wrong with the environment that aren't just climate change. If we look at society, we can see that our political system is starting to become polarized. We're starting to see more fundamentalism because people are able to preach a divisive narrative. People aren't getting what they wanted from the system. So it plays to the hands of people who want to divide people and say, well, actually, that's so-and-so's fault. And that's why we've got a rise of fundamentalism in politics. And I was at the launch of the Innovation Festival the other day, and the Mayor Tracy was talking about this so powerfully, and she shared about how she came into politics inspired by Jo Cox and her speech about how there's more that unites us than divides us. And I think this is an opportunity to build on that. And then thirdly, so we've had environment, we've had society, but on an individual level, there's a blooming problem with mental health, with depression, with suicide rates, with obesity, with diabetes. So on an individual basis, the system isn't working for us either. So how did we get here? Well, oddly, a lot of it comes down to this Nobel Prize winning economist, Simon Kuznets, and he was invited by the US government to give him a model for how they could grow their industrial machine, how they could grow their armament machine, and he came up with this idea of measuring all the output from the economy and calling it gross national product or gross domestic product as we've got to, and that was all his idea. And the reason it's perpetuated is because what gets measured is what gets managed. So we've measured the money, we've measured the growth, and that's what we're managing. Kuznets he didn't just say, oh, you know, growth is a good thing. He put forward this idea, the Kuznets curve, that said that eventually for a period of time, things would get worse. As the economy grew, things would get worse, and there'd be more environmental degradation. There'd be more income inequalities. There'd be less well-being. But it's all right, because eventually we'll turn the corner, and then it'll be downhill all the way, and it'll be fine. It'll be all right. But actually, this model has been disproven. There is no relationship between income and well-being. So if you look at this chart, I am going to share a few charts, but I'll try not to, and I'll explain them when I do. But if you look at this chart, we've got health and social problems on the left-hand side, and national income along the bottom. And you can see there's no correlation there. Look, the worst index of health and social problems is the US, right up there, right at the top of national income. And then one of the lowest levels of health and social problems is Spain, right down there at the other end. So you can't say that growing income, growing the economy, leads to better well-being. To be fair to Kuznets, he recognised that. So even when he came up with this theory, one of the things that he said is the welfare of a nation can scarcely be inferred from a measurement of national income. So he recognised the faults that were there within his system, but it stuck, and that's been the thing that we've judged our economy by, and that's been the driving narrative: is an economy that's led by growth. But we've seen where it's got us. So how could we do something different? Well, along came Kate Raworth, who was an economist working within Oxfam, who was looking at the system and said, well, actually, this isn't working. The system isn't working. So what happened if we turned it around and started with humanity's long-term goals, and then sought out the economic thinking that would enable us to achieve them? And so we ended up with Doughnut Economics. Now, this is where it all goes wrong, because I need to stop sharing this screen and share my other screen, so that I can bring you, hang on, I'll stop sharing, that's me again, hello. If you've got any questions, do feel free to throw them into the chat. We'll bring them all together, and we'll answer them all at the end. Let's share this one. And of course, would you believe it? I can't actually. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to carry on. I was going to show you a little video that's on the Doughnut Economics website. I can't do it. It's not working. So I'm going to quit while I'm ahead, and I'm going to go back to screen sharing. If it will let me. There we go. Right. So there we are. So we've got Kate Raworth turning things on its head and saying, well, actually, what happens if we start with humanity rather than trying to work with what we've got with the growth engine? And what you get is you think about the system, and I guess I would characterise it at the moment that we're playing a lot of whack-a-mole. So problems emerge from the system, and we run around and we whack it on its head, but we're only ever addressing the outcome, not the cause. And the only way to address the cause is to turn off the machine. When you're playing whack-a-mole, all you can do to stop the moles popping up is turn off the machine. And I think that's what Doughnut Economics helps us do, because it gives us a mechanism where we can start to understand, well, what is it? Where is the space for humanity to operate in a safe and just manner? Now, Leeds is quite a long way into this. So we're one of the first cities, as I mentioned at the start, to have done a data portrait. So I'm going to hand over to Jenny to take us through the learning from the Leeds data portrait. Jenny's she's communication and engagement lead here at Climate Action Leeds. She was one of the founders of the Doughnut Economics Coalition here in Leeds. I'm so grateful to Jenny for everything that she's done. She used to work for the Scottish Parliament. She was an advisor on participation. She also chairs the Kirkgate Community Centre, sits on the oversight panel for the Shipley Citizens Jury. She is doing a lot of stuff, so it's brilliant work. So I'm going to hand over to Jenny. I'll carry on sharing my screen, but Jenny is going to come in, and you'll hear Jenny talking instead of me.
Thanks for that introduction, Tim. Yeah, so I work at Climate Action Leeds, and the connection between Climate Action Leeds and the Leeds Doughnut is because we saw a really big connection between Kate Rayworth's work and what we're doing in Leeds and how we want to do it. So next slide, please. Next slide, Tim. Thank you. So Climate Action Leeds is a 5-year national lottery funded programme of work with a vision of achieving a zero carbon, nature friendly, socially just Leeds by the 2030s. And we incorporate in this programme climate action in 8 local community hubs across the city, with 7 partners galvanising action for a just transition within sectors such as transport, energy and nature. And then combining that with working at the city level of planning for how to achieve the huge transformation Leeds needs to address the multiple current crises. So we see the Doughnut framing as a really holistic, accessible and appealing tool for planning and visioning at all these levels. So we're really keen to use it in our work, and we put a group together, and new people joined us from all walks of life, including Tim, Joe, Irena and many others. And it's open to all, so I encourage you to get involved if it floats your boat. So we did some initial desk-based research funded by the University of Leeds between summer of 2021 and April this year to see where we're at, so how Leeds is doing. So this is the Leeds Doughnut. So I'm aware that today this is a West Yorkshire event and not just about Leeds, but really the Doughnut has tools supporting it which can be applied at any level. So at the national and global level, you can see how countries compare with each other and the vast disparities in how they fall short of the social foundation or overshoot the planetary boundaries. Like in that diagram that Tim has just shown us, the safe and just space for humanity is in the green space within those boundaries. So you can do this down to the neighbourhood or street level, like myself and Kat, who worked on the Leeds Doughnut, are now working with Civic Square in Birmingham to do just that for the Ladywood neighbourhood. So I do know of work going on in on a West Yorkshire Doughnut, and I'm very keen to hear more about that if colleagues are present here today. But for now, I'm just going to tell you a bit about what's been happening in Leeds. So we launched our report on those initial findings in April. Next slide, please, at a large day conference at Open Innovations in the city centre. Next slide, please. So how can Leeds become a home to thriving people in a thriving place while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? Are we living between those two boundaries? Are we fulfilling our local aspirations in balance with our global responsibilities? So the Doughnut, and we can unroll the Doughnut if we want to get into this work. And it unrolls into a quadrant of 4 lenses, each of which asks a different question. Next slide, please. So starting at the bottom left there, we look at the local social lens. Are people thriving in Leeds? Moving up, we look at, are we looking after local nature? In the bottom right, we're looking at the global social lens, and moving up to the top, looking at our global ecological impact. So I'm going to run through these lenses and highlight briefly a few of our findings to give a sense of what we did. The summary report has much more in it, and there's a full research document too. Both can be found on our website, and this is what the report looks like. Okay, next slide, please. So, are people in Leeds thriving? This is the local social. So the methodology for assessing where we are draws on a number of dimensions which represent each lens. So for example, with the local social picture, by looking at 16 factors like housing, education, safety, culture, health, food, social equity, political voice, and so on. We then select indicators which say something about each dimension and have relevant and timely data available. To see whether we are within the safe space or falling short requires setting a threshold. And where available, we use targets set by local authority, national or global bodies. So I'll just take you through a couple of examples on each of these 4 lenses. I can't do them all today, but like I say, they're in the main report. So here's our first one that I'm going to highlight is that in 2019, nearly 17% of Leeds households were considered to be in fuel poverty. Now, obviously, current circumstances would be likely to cause this to increase. So as you see, we've used the red wedges, like Kate used in her circular diagram, but the red wedges, as we've unrolled the donut, to show that we're falling short on this, and this is likely to take us in the wrong direction heading into autumn and winter with the energy price rises. So whenever we look at any of these wedges, we're asking the question, where are we? If we're outside of the safe and thriving space, what needs to happen to move us into that place? Another one, people in more deprived areas of Leeds have a life expectancy 10.5 years less than those in the least deprived areas. Onto the next slide, please, Tim. So on the other hand, a recent survey found that 84% of Leeds residents feel safe in their community. So maybe that's not a bad figure. This is the thing, we don't know where the threshold should rightly lie. And setting thresholds for social indicators raises key questions about our aspirations and values as a society. So these are really tools to get into the nitty-gritty of how we want to be and what needs to change. Into the next slide, please, Tim. So these are just marking out all the different indicators, but I'm only highlighting some because of the pressure of time today. So onto the local ecological lens, we use indicators across 4 key ecosystems of water, land, air, and matter to create our own portrait here. We focus on how nature operates each service and how Leeds can mimic these natural approaches to improve and regenerate each one. So generally, data and targets are harder to pull together in this lens, though this is changing, but a few of our findings are highlighted here. So currently, about 17% of Leeds metropolitan area's tree canopy. To offset carbon emissions, this needs to be increased to 33%. So that's an additional 9,000 hectares that need to be found. I think we've got a few others, Tim, if you could just get them all up on that slide. Yeah. So flooding, obviously a key risk for our area, and especially across West Yorkshire and the Humber more broadly. Over 11,000 properties in Leeds are at medium to high risk of being flooded. And air quality, that's on a lot of people's radars at the moment. Air quality in Leeds is rated as good in the WHO rankings. However, some areas like the city centre and inner ring road fall short of air quality objectives for nitrogen dioxide, which is pollutant of concern. So you can see some of these are nuanced. It's not a black and white picture. Moving on to the global social lens. So this is the hardest lens to assess in a lot of ways, and the basing of the dimensions in the UN Sustainable Development Goals is highly contested. The Doughnut community are working on developing alternative ways of assessing this lens and in a meaningful way within a decolonising narrative to flesh out its dimensions a bit more. So bearing in mind those limitations, for Leeds, we decided to adopt a consumption footprinting approach to begin with, similar to how carbon footprinting is done. So I've highlighted again a few of our findings. So what we found was that in 2018, there were more than 21,000 child labourers in the global supply chains resulting from consuming goods and services in Leeds. If you get the next one up, Tim. And goods and services imported into Leeds result in 25 workplace fatalities and 13,500 injuries a year elsewhere in the world. Mostly these are in Africa. There's a final one. Yeah. And nearly 500,000 hectares of cropland and grazing area across the world is required to support goods and services imported into Leeds. So that's twice the size of the Yorkshire Dales that Leeds is drawing on to just function as it is at the moment. So again, there are no agreed thresholds set here, but arguably there really should be, raising fundamental questions about how we view ourselves in relation to the people and places of the rest of the world. So moving on to our global ecological findings, we can see that each person in Leeds, if you can get the graphics up, Tim. Yeah, each person in Leeds is responsible for producing 9.6 tonnes of carbon per year, which exceeds the safe boundary of 1.6 tonnes by almost 6 times. Next one, please. The global land footprint of an average resident in Leeds is 2.3 times the safe boundary. So we can see massive overshooting here, can't we, of that planetary ceiling set out in Cape Raworth's model. In Leeds, an average person can be linked to the use of over 13 tonnes of materials such as fossil fuels, wood and metals, exceeding safe planetary boundaries almost twice. And onto the next slide, we can see very clearly the depiction of these overshoots in the Doughnut infographic. So we're massively overshooting here, but it's interesting to note, if you break this down according to income, that responsibility for these impacts is not equal. So in those with a higher income, they have a significantly higher footprint, larger footprint than those with the lower income. Next slide, please. So that's a whistle-stop tour through our work, and it's very much to be seen as work in progress, and we have plans to develop it and deepen it further. It's presented as a partial piece and offered as a conversation starter to you. So what does your city portrait look like for you as individuals, families, communities or businesses? What's happening already to move into that safe and just space for all? And what else needs to happen to get us there? The 4 lenses framing, that quadrant of questions, is also a really good way to examine proposed solutions. So for example, I was at a business networking event yesterday, and I know some of you here were there too. And the solution or the proposition of carbon offsetting was raised there. I think that's a classic example where we need to really put that in the middle of those questions and scrutinize it to make sure that if it's working for one quadrant, it's also working for the others. So we see this as a tool for change. Next slide, please, Tim. And a real opportunity to reflect on our way of life here through those 4 lenses. So what are the challenges we need to act on? What's working well and what should we keep? What new trends and opportunities do we need to grasp? And we see it as a real way into conversations about the city's development model. So there's a strength here in that we're connected into the larger Doughnut Economics Action Lab community, and there's a raft of tools coming out, and Tim will talk more about the ones for business later, but there's also tools that can be used down at you know, in schools, on your street, and we're learning all the time from what people are doing in other parts of the world, applying the Doughnut Economics model in ways that make sense for them in their place. So it's a real entry point for ideas, and there are loads of areas of innovation. Here are just a few of the many Doughnut-y initiatives and areas either already happening or up for grabs, and I'm sure you'll have more of your own. And at the Leeds Doughnut Coalition, we're really keen to engage with communities, institutions and businesses who want to move any of these forward. I think that's it from me. We'd love to hear from you about what you're doing, so do get in touch. Our details will be at the end, and thanks for listening. And if you have any questions for me, I'll cover them in the last section. Thanks, Tim.
Amazing, thanks, Jenny. Jenny had a huge challenge there to cover off. This is what the Doughnut tells us about a city in just 15 minutes. But I hope it's given you an inkling that this is a powerful tool for looking at the system, and I think that's the point. Is what we're trying to do is look at the whole system. And not take a reductivist approach, which says, well, actually, we can fix this bit of it, or we can fix that bit of it. What Doughnut Economics is about embracing the whole system. But that is it's a challenge, and I'm sure there's lots of people sat there thinking, well, I mean, where do we even start? Well, we start by making change. I'm sure many of you know who Buckminster Fuller is, visionary designer, inventor of the hexagon biome, just a genius. But he said you can never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing obsolete. And that's why we were so keen to talk about this in the context of the West Yorkshire Innovation Festival, because we're going to need huge amounts of innovation to take us into the future that we need to see. So some of you might be aware of the three horizons model for thinking about the future. And the horizons are times, really. So H1, that's where we are now. H3 is where we need to get to into the future. And if you look at those two, in the middle there's a gap between business as usual and the emerging future. And it's disruptive innovation that we want to stimulate that takes us through there. There is quite an interesting debate, though, as to what innovation actually does, and does it take us to the new future that we need, or does it just perpetuate business as usual? And you can see that's there on the left hand side of the slide. Now, the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, the core team behind this, have spent a long time working through their approach so that they can offer it out and scale it. So the first thing that they did was start by introducing it to cities in the way that you've seen Jenny do there. So we started by looking at the four quadrants, understanding what it means for a city, for a place. Now they're getting to the point where they want to understand, well, what does this mean within an actual business? How can we help businesses through this innovation journey using the tool of the Doughnut? And what they've concluded is that this needs to be truly transformational. So the Doughnut needs to inspire change in the business model. It's not about tinkering around the edges. It's not about looking at your carbon footprint on its own or your employee ownership model on its own. It's about saying we are part of a system. So we need to recognise that, and we need to transform our business at a fundamental enterprise level. Now it is a scary prospect, but it's the prospect that we need to address if we're gonna take things forward and start to change the system from within, because it's quite clear that businesses are the transformation engine within that Doughnut. They're the bit that takes social capital and natural resources and turns it into something of value. But we've also been providing a lot of negative value as well, and that's what Doughnut Economics is trying to get to grips with. So it's not going to be about certification, like say B Corps or Fair Trade or any of those other certification approaches. What Doughnut Economics is about being transformative. So it's about transformation and not accreditation. And the thinking is starting to come through about what does that mean? So it starts to look at your business and says, well, actually, let's get back to brass tacks. What's our purpose? What's the network that we're involved with? How are we governed? What's our ownership model? How are we financed? And then you can start to ask some big questions, like which aspects of our design are holding us back? And how can our design move us into a thriving future? Now, they sound like very big questions. Just try and pin them down a bit. Let's look at what it might mean. So two of the two areas of change that are there for businesses are to be more regenerative and more redistributive. So again, this is recognizing that businesses are part of a system. So it's not just saying actually we'll be super environmentally friendly and not look at our social aspects, or vice versa. And so I think this is one of the ways that Doughnut Economics is really different from other models, is that it does reconcile the environmental and the social and doesn't try and play them off against each other. But it also reconciles them globally as well. So it's not just looking at this in a local context. It's saying actually, what does this mean for global justice if we were to do the things we should. So when we look at regenerative, what that means is actually learning from nature. Nature abhors waste. Nothing in nature is waste. So if we look at the flows of resources, we can see them as two different flows. We've got biological resources and technical resources. Now, biological resources, nature takes care of herself remarkably well. If we let nature take care of itself, we won't be producing waste. We will use our biological resources and they will work their way back round into the system, and there won't be a waste product. Technical resources, nutrients, minerals, they don't fit themselves back into the system quite so effectively. So that's why you'll hear so much talk about things like circular economies in the context of Doughnut Economics, because it's learning from nature and applying that to our technical systems and saying, well, actually, what does this mean for how we keep materials in circulation, how we keep value in materials and don't waste any value. So it's not just about recycling. It might be about different models. It might be a rental model as opposed to a purchase model. There's so many different opportunities in there, but we need to regenerate. It's not just about doing less bad, because we can see we've already overshot. So businesses, those agents of transformation, actually need to be making things better. So it's not just about being less bad, it's about being more good. So that's the regenerate side. What in terms of redistribution, really what we're talking about is redistributing money and power within your business. Or that might be upstream with your suppliers or downstream with your customers. So it's thinking differently about what money is, about what value is within the business, and how we use that to create well-being and benefit for all, as opposed to providing benefit for the few. Because this is a redistributive approach, which I fully appreciate is not flavour of the month at the moment. However, here, remember back to that slide that we had before, where income was not at all correlated with equality. Well, actually, income inequality is absolutely smack bang correlated to index of health. So the more income inequality you have, the more health and social problems you have. So the more equal your income is distributed through society, the lower the level of health and social problems. So redistribution does work. That's what this table is showing us, is that if you redistribute, if you don't have an unequal society, you will have less social problems, social and environmental problems. And what might that mean? We talked before, didn't we, about what gets measured gets managed, and businesses have been so used to looking at the financial bottom line. Well, actually, we need to start looking at some different bottom lines in order to be able to underpin this. And we do have some examples of that here in Yorkshire. So Yorkshire Water are using what they call six capitals accounting. Well, it's what's called six capitals accounting. But that's about saying, well, actually, the value that we're creating, the value that the stocks that we're transforming are more than just monetary stocks. So you can see their six capitals break down to financial capital, manufacture capital, intellectual capital. That's the intellectual property. The human capital, the workforce, their capabilities, their skills, and their well-being. Natural capital, and the social capital, the impact on society. So you can see that people are starting to work through, well, what does this aspirational approach mean in practical terms? So you can see we're starting to get to the point where we can piece together all of the different bits. Now, Doughnut Economics Action Lab, they've not engaged with businesses so far, because, like I explained, they've been working through their approach to make sure that they didn't diminish the donut and used it in the way that it can have the maximum impact. But now they're about to get to the point where they're starting to release resources that we can use to work with businesses. And here in Leeds, we're one of the first areas to be part of that conversation about, well, what would it mean to start to work with our businesses? And this is broadly what it would look like. So it would start by doing exactly what we've done for the city, but within your business. So exploring those four dimensions, the four quadrants of global and local, social and environmental, and unpacking the impact of your business in that sort of sense. Now, you can do it in terms of data, or you can do it in terms of your experience. And then from there, you use that as a jumping off point to look at, well, what does regenerative mean in this context? What does redistributive mean in this context? And how can we be the most ambitious that we possibly can be? And having set that vision, you can then start to go back to your business and say, well, where are we? How are we governed? How are we financed? How does it all work? How do we fit our aspirations together with our business model? And from those two pieces, then you can start to look at redesigning your business. And that would be redesigning it in a strategic term, but also going out and getting the help that you need to do this. Because there are huge amounts of resources and activity being put in this direction that are there. The means are there. What we need is businesses that are ready to take up the challenge and to run with it and to try and do things. So this isn't launched yet, but as soon as the deal team are ready to engage businesses within this, we'll be introducing it here in Leeds. That's the end of our talky bit. So we will share these slides with you after the event. A couple of links on there on the slide on the screen at the moment, so you can find out more about the Doughnut on the Climate Action Leeds website. You can find out more about Doughnut Economics on the Deal website, and you're welcome to get in touch with either me or Jenny via our emails that are there. But I'm going to stop screen sharing and actually be back in the room in person. So there we go. Questions, please. Anyone? So it can be a question about how this might be applied to your business, or it can be a question about the methodology that we've used to do the Doughnut here in Leeds, or it can be about anything that you want, really. Anzir.
Hi, I don't know if maybe it's possibly playing devil's advocate in some respect, because obviously I'm in on all this. So I'm city plan lead at Climate Action Leeds, and tasked with maybe implementing some of this in our city plan. But I guess from a business perspective, I think we've talked in a lot of places with Doughnut Economic Action Lab and other people about kind of a local authority based, almost top down approach, and that's what's happening in a lot of the cities that are implementing the Doughnut at the moment. So the question really is, and maybe it's more to some of our attendees from the business community, is what does business have to gain in itself from implementing a Doughnut? So, really, is there something, aside from, the fact there is no certification, there will not be any certification, because that's not what the Doughnut Economics Action Lab wants, for businesses to be adopting it. So there isn't the, oh, we want to be a B Corp, so we can say we're a B Corp. So, yeah, what is it to gain, I suppose, for a business?
It's a really good question. I think what there is to gain for the business is you can't isolate a business from society. So the benefits of the business are the same as the benefits for society. And if we don't do this, there isn't going to be a future. So what can a business gain? Well, it can gain a future. But I think that takes us into one of the routes in that we might look to engage businesses. And for businesses that are looking to the future, if they're planning far enough ahead, they must be modelling in the impacts of climate change. They must be modelling in the costs of that. And this can start to ameliorate some of that and change the way it works. And yes, at the moment, the deal doesn't come with a shiny badge to wear. But more importantly, what it does come with is with a methodology that can take you to the heart of your business and to put it on the path to that thriving future. And businesses that do that are the ones that customers want to buy from, that people want to work with, and that people are proud to be making a contribution to. So I think it would be reductive to just look at it and say, well, how many more customers are you going to get as a result of this by putting a badge on this? What you're going to do is you're going to change your businesses to the type of businesses that delivers a future in which we can all thrive. I can see I've got a question from Charles, and I've got Paul who's got his hand up. Go. Kat, did you want to come in? Oh, you're on mute, even though you've unmuted yourself.
My headphones don't work sometimes, but yeah, I'd love to come in on just on that point before we move on.
Go for it.
Possible. I think a lot of what this thinking is about as well is like, we're not going to access and transform every business at the starting point. So it's finding those leverage points of businesses that are willing, and part of creating that distributive society is building up the networks of those organizations that are aligned in that way. And it's not about the superficial, we've got a badge to show that we're on this journey. It's genuinely that transformative thinking and the power of creating those networks of organizations that are on that same journey and at the same point to build this new system. It's like not a badge that kind of shows that you're on that, but you know, it's more meaningful than that, and it's creating those distributive networks of and creating the strength in that network of people who and organizations that want to take this that step further than what you get from having a badge. Not to, you know, disvalue B Corps and co-ops and all those. So yeah.
Thanks, Kat. Paul, do you want to come in and ask your question in person?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, my name's Paul. I'm doing some work with UK 100, which is an organisation promoting climate leadership in local government. I'm currently just doing some work with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. So it was fascinating seeing the work being done in Leeds. We're just wondering if there's any thought being given at all to what this might look like at a region level.
Jenny, you were sort of hinting at that.
Yeah, I wonder if Andy can answer this question. I know there are moves to do it at a West Yorkshire level.
I don't actually know enough about what Wyker's doing at the moment.
I mean, so I think we're not entirely sure. What we've got in Leeds is a really good starting point. It's a fractal approach, though, so it can be applied at any level. So it can be applied from a very local community to a city. So potentially, yes, you can do it at a regional level. The thing is we need to act on the system at lots of different scales. So not just geographic scales, but also on as Jenny talked about in her presentation. We're working with communities, we're working with households, we're working with institutions, and we're working with businesses and the local and national government. So there's seeds of change in every part of this. So yes, of course, it could work at a regional level. Jo, did you want to come in on that?
I was just going to...
Yeah, I was just going to say briefly to add to that, there's I think huge potential to use this, applying it to supply chains. I mean, you talked about customers and you talked about suppliers, but for some parts of the economy, those supply chains are quite long. And it's like, how could you spread, not just in both directions, in a short tail, but in a long tail as well?
Go on, Jenny, as well. I know you want to come in.
Yeah, so I suppose it depends. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Andy. I just it depends what sort of work you're talking about. So our study, our research portrait, was done on Leeds because of the, you know, it's a natural kind of level to work at. But we've also got a hub that's doing it at the Otley level, and then we've got we're linked in to lots of different people across the country and across the world who are doing it at other scales. So if you're talking about doing it, you know, doing a data portrait at the West Yorkshire level, we'd have to look at different sets of targets, different data sets, and it would need some resourcing to do that research effectively. I think more kind of loosely, if you're talking about organising and doing this thinking and framing at the West Yorkshire level, there's no reason that the Leeds Doughnut should, you know, can't extend and incorporate other people, because broadly we're looking at similar sorts of things. So
yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so if you look at the Doughnut Economics Action Lab website, there's actually a map. You can sort of register your interest there. There's a map of people who are interested in doing Doughnut Economics, and there's you know, there's a growing body of people who are interested. So it might be that if we wanted to coordinate something across West Yorkshire, we start by looking at who's interested, where they are, what their roles are, and then try to pull something together at that level. I suppose my interest is that yes, that initial portrait, the data portrait, is really interesting and really necessary because it shows you where you are, but that is only the first step. That's an assessment tool. What you need to do is have those conversations about, well, where do we want to get to? What's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and what are the levers and actions that are required to move us into that safe and thriving place? So in a way, you know, you don't need to, the data portrait helps you, but we don't want to get too hung up on that if actually we're aware that things need to change, and it's about mobilizing and capitalizing those forces of change in our region.
That's really useful. Thanks. I think yeah, just to clarify, because there isn't much capacity on this. It is just me kind of looking at this, and I think it is more about that framing piece, or the how do we start to just embed the principles into some of the things that are going on, and particularly the combined authorities committees, and making sure that things are being thought of a bit more holistically based on some of these principles. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of. I will follow up individually with some of you, and it would be really useful to talk just one-on-one, but that's really useful. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I think Paul's question sort of relates to a question that we've got in the chat from Charles, who says, "What can we learn from Amsterdam about how they try to apply this model to their city? In other words, what parts failed as opposed to succeeded?" Now, I know Charles, so I can take him up on his language here. I don't think we can talk about this as failure, because that presupposes that there is a solution, and there isn't an end solution. We are never going to find an end solution to this. All we can do is start to propose interventions that we can learn from that move us in the right direction. But really, that's what Charles is asking. He's saying, well, what can we learn from what is happening elsewhere? I think Amsterdam did an amazing job at animating people, galvanizing people. I was in a call with one of their hosts the other day, and they've got 1,000 people have signed up to be part of the Amsterdam Doughnut Coalition. You've got half the Leeds Doughnut Coalition here on this call. I mean, that's how many people are on the Leeds Doughnut Coalition. So they did fabulously well at reaching out and engaging with people. It's interesting that their political leadership has changed since they made a big thing of the donut, and actually the resilience that they've developed in the community has allowed them to be a bit more powerful. But oddly, because it was driven by the council or whatever their local government equivalent is, they were reluctant as amongst some community members to get involved, and it was seen to be a different model. So there's learning all the way, but I think when you've got such a massive challenge, it's back to that whole thing about how do you eat an elephant, where you break it down into bite-sized chunks, and we've just got to start eating away at this thing. We've got to start innovating. We've got to start looking at what does it mean to create change? How can we distribute that? And then how can we all move forward together, rather than going, oh, you've not solved it, so it's a fair. And I know that's not what you were saying, Charles. I do get that. By my watch, we've got 4 minutes left. Go on, Jenny.
I'm just going to follow up on Amsterdam. Yeah, it's really interesting how different places have worked with the donut model in different ways. So that was quite as Anzia used the term, top-down approach initially, and now, as Tim's showing it's moved. If you look at Regen Melbourne, they've done it in a completely different way, starting with grassroots level action, and then growing out from there. So every place does it in different ways, and each portrait builds on the last one. So this is a really, you know, it's kind of, we're all working together at the forefront of a new methodology. So people have now taken the Leeds Doughnut portrait and are using it and taking it further forward and critiquing it and seeing what they can do to make it real in their places. yeah, I was going to say something else, but I forgot what it was.
Well, I suppose we need to end with a bit of a call to action, don't we? Because that's the important thing. What are we going to do about this? Well. Here in the Doughnut Coalition, we're working on building our capacity. We've got a couple of funding bids in at the moment to help us work with communities. We're developing our own approach. We're engaging with the Doughnut Economics Action Lab to say, how can we get our business involved? We've got lots of other plans. But I think the thing that we're all very aware of is that there are so many people and organisations and businesses also moving in the same direction, that the big thing that we want to understand is who else is going this way with us, and how can we get there better and faster together. So I think that's our request to everyone, is if this strikes a chord, if you want to do it, if you're already doing it, get involved, get in touch, because our vision is of Leeds being a place that seeds the future. We can make the future right here in Leeds, in West Yorkshire, in Yorkshire, in the UK, whatever the scale. We need to create a future, because of the way the system's working at the moment, it's not giving us a future. And much as we'd like to put our heads in the sand and not acknowledge that truth, that is the actual truth. We've seen from the data we are overshooting the planetary carrying capacity. We're undershooting in terms of looking after people. We are doing it wrong. The system is delivering unintended consequences. So we need to find a different system. So that's the work that we want to be part of. If you'd like to be part of it, we would love to do it with you. Jenny, any last thoughts?
Yeah, that's right, Tim. We want to be part of that transformative change, and people come at it from lots of different directions in lots of different ways, and that's where the joy, you can get bogged down in the challenges, but that's where all the joy and the creativity and the innovation comes in. So do let us know what you're up to in your own fields, and this is the part of really building a community in Leeds, in West Yorkshire more widely, and seeing where we can get this to, because this is our decade of transformative change, and it starts now, and it starts with us, and there's a lot of positivity in there as well. So let's hold on to that and build that together. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Fab. Thank you, everybody. We are going to pop this on the Climate Action Leeds website. We'll share the presentation with you all, so you've all got it as well. But yeah, hopefully you'll look back on this in future and say, we were there at the start. We were there at the start of the change for businesses and donuts here in Leeds. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for your question, Charles.